Hey, what's up, bud?
Hey, man, sorry my Wi-Fi just wasn't going to cooperate there. I couldn't get to you.
I can hear you perfectly right now. How's
Cool,
everything
cool.
going? It's good to finally get to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, man. You too.
So,
What's going on? Hey, I'm gonna finish my workout here. I was gonna do something kind of cool live for your folks here if you give it half a second.
yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right, hang on a second. Let me grab one thing here. I'll be right back. Okay, can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay, can you? My wife's holding the phone, says we're kind of rigging this as we go because this is my first deal with a live situation, so I have no idea
We're doing
what's
it.
up here. So I was just already working out doing dumbbell rows. So I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it now? I probably should come down. Here we go.
Yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, this is the 300-pound dumbbell. I'm going to see if I can do a quick row or two with it.
oh man, get it. Let's go, bud. Yeah. 300 pounds, guys. Ooh, hell yeah.
All right, maybe not too bad because I hadn't done that in heavy in a while, so maybe that'll look pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah, that was awesome, dude. Thank you.
Cool, man.
You were a strong guy.
Well, some days.
So could you give the people who aren't familiar with you a little bit about your background?
Okay. So in lifting, et cetera, and that kind of thing, I got started at about 14 years old, and I got started training for football, and I happened to go to this little gym that was like half a mile down the street from my house, and I went to a little private school, played football there. They were building a new facility, but they didn't have a weight room, so they started getting us there to go to different weight rooms and stuff just where we lived, and they happened to have a powerlifting team. And I worked out for like 3 days, and the guy walked up to me and said, "Hey man, why don't you come work out with us? And we're gonna get ready for a meet in like 6 months." And I said, "Okay, whatever," because I didn't know anything. I was 13 freaking years old, man. I had no idea. And but I already had kind of a thing about working hard. I'd learned to do that as a kid, and so they let me in, basically. And I started working out with them, and 6 months later was my first competition, and I set 4 state records and competed for 16 years,
Wow.
off and on. Best stuff I did was in powerlifting. Best stuff I did was I won a USPF National Teenage Championships. Set 3 national records there. I won the WNPF World Lifetime Drug Free Championship much later, and actually that one was on a whim. I'd already actually left powerlifting and was actually training for strongman and wasn't really even doing the regular power lifts very much, and just heard about the meet like 2 weeks beforehand and went over and happened to do pretty well. I set their national squat or their world squat record and their world total record. And then I started competing in everything crazy you could possibly do. Strongman competition, Highland Games. I did quite a bit of martial arts. I actually got started in martial arts from being as a kid.
Mhm.
So I had a car accident at about 5 years old. And what happened was I walked in front of a van. The van crushed my hip, fractured my skull, put me in a body cast for months and months. And they were giving me all this, cortico drugs and stuff to help you heal and different things and stuff or whatever they did. So I went from being this little wiry kid to I literally came out of the cast like double the size I was when I went in. And had trouble walking and had all kind of trouble just rehabilitating. And this is in the early 70s, and they really weren't doing much for rehab. It wasn't like today where, you break your pinky and you're in rehab tomorrow. It's not like that. Back then they sent you home with a bottle of lotion and said good luck, and you were pretty much, that was the deal. But my mom was real progressive, and she met a guy who was a Taekwondo instructor, and he got me. And so at 6, I started doing that. And that got me really into like athletics and flexibility, and I got really sort of a respect for just physical movement and strength and that kind of thing. And then later on, years go by, and I started all the heavy, crazy stuff, and had an interest in a wide variety of all kind of strength and martial arts and all that stuff. And I got a chance to perform a lot. What I really got into and what I really sort of specialize in is the widest possible variety of strength. And what I really got into was the old-time strongman stuff. And so I had an opportunity to actually make a living doing that for several years. I performed, did a ton of school and church shows. I actually did over 1,000 school shows in a 3-year period. So I actually got a real chance to live the way those guys actually did, in that they for real lived and performed. I performed like twice a day, 5 days a week for 9 months a year.
Wow.
And so I got a real taste of what it was like to kind of travel and live and train and perform and have to balance it all and do all that whole thing. And then I lost my mind, and I've done all the crazy stuff I can possibly do since then. I'm just, dude, I can't, like, I have a thing about building creativity into your training and new challenges and new stuff like that. So whatever wacko crap I can come up with is the next thing.
I love that. That's right up my alley. And that's amazing that you are living, or were like those old school strongmen who traveled and did the routes, displaying their strength. That's rare that we have someone with your experience who is doing the same thing that they were doing, and it's a loss.
It's a rare thing, man. Especially in because in the modern era, there really has only been 1 or 2 guys, less than 10 or 12 worldwide, who've actually made a living as a single performer and perform full time. Now they went to the church thing, got into this whole team deal where they had like power team and all that stuff or whatever, and their guys do that. But like to be able to, but what people don't know about the whole performing thing, okay, is now in the vaudeville era, a lot of times they had an announcer, or they didn't even speak; they just performed to music. But in the modern era, you can't do that. And especially if you're a single performer. So like I performed, other than if I have a buddy with me or something, or we were performing with other, but I never performed in the team setting where there's like 7 guys and everybody does 1 feet and you go sit down or anything like that. Like when you do a school show, I did a school anti-bullying shows, it's 45 minutes nonstop. Talk feet, back and forth. So you both got to be in shape. In other words, you can't. You got to balance how hard the feet is. Okay, so when you do a feat, you can't like just do something that any knucklehead can walk out of the audience and do, because that's too easy. It's got to be hard enough that it's difficult and truly people understandable. And that's another thing with that, is that the old time guys really, like, a lot of the stuff they did is bending steel or using like household objects. So they roll a frying pan or bend a spike or whatever. They do that because the average guy, now guys following you and guys following me and that whole thing or whatever, a little different. They understand what a dumbbell. I just rode a big dumbbell. They get it. Kids and regular adults who don't touch weights don't understand. You can walk in with a dumbbell that's 150 pounds, walk in with a dumbbell that's 300 pounds. They'll barely be able to tell the difference, and they won't know. But if you take a deck of cards out of the plastic and tear it in half, they get it. They immediately understand the strength of the whole thing. And then, if you stack up performing 2, 3, 4 times a day with a full 45-minute show with 6 or 7 strongman feats, as well as a speaking-based message throughout that gets to be quite a deal, especially with a different hotel every night and a couple thousand miles a week and whatever else you might be doing. It's kind of a crazy.
That's hard training right there. Yeah, just
absolutely.
So speaking of old school strongman stuff, what do you think today in the modern fitness culture, and I mean the bodybuilders and also the CrossFit culture, what do you think they've missed that the golden era of strongmen really contributed to overall fitness culture, physical culture? What's missing that
I think probably the actual physical culture aspect, if that makes sense. In other words, those guys, especially when you start talking about it from that period, did not. There were some guys who concentrated on how they looked, but a lot of those guys, you had to get respect in that era. Okay, you came from an era of working men, of guys who, like, it's a big deal to go out into the farmlands and perform at a circus when everybody there works with tools and sledgehammers and stuff all day. So if you pull out a strength feat, you might have some big old farm boy just walk out and do it because he's been picking up 200 and 300-pound rocks, or he's been swinging a 10, 15, 20-pound sledgehammer at a railroad all day, so he's already in freaking shape. You had to be not only above average that, but you also had to have, like I'll give you an example of something that they used to say about Arthur Saxon. In some of his billing, Arthur, if you don't know, Arthur Saxon was probably definitely one of the top strongmen of all time. By far the king of the old school bent press, by far, long shot. In some of his billing, they talked about he was a man who looks strong, but he actually is strong, and he as a man who could miss a night of sleep and not be affected. He's a man who he had a vitality, and I think that's the thing we've missed in modern physical culture, in that it doesn't carry the breadth of real physical culture. Now, that's where I actually think CrossFit has made a massive impact in widespread fitness, because they agree, disagree, whatever you think about CrossFit, they did bring lifts and intensity, good or bad, that they did bring it to the mainstream that it did not have before. And with the idea of, okay, yeah, I need to be able to have a big squat, or I need to be able to lift something heavy, or do an old school clean and jerk or something like that, but I also need to be able to run 5 miles or do whatever along that line. Like, I think that's the thing we've missed in the old school physical culture. I think they were more accepting than we are, because what happened in the major, what happened is, okay, so they, at that time, they were in the formation of early competition lifting. So when the Olympics kind of allowed strength stuff, and they brought that in, and weightlifting was in the first couple of Olympics, and then the whole thing or whatever, that changed from year to year. There was different lifts, there was different thing, and eventually it standardized to a whole thing. But when that happened, what happened is people began to totally specialize, and then we split off. So then you had Olympic lifters, and you had power lifters, and you had strongmen, and you had bodybuilders, and you had, at that time, the physical culture guy was just as likely to be able to walk up and lift a big barbell in a clean and jerk, and then do a bent press or a big lift with a dumbbell, as well as a grip thing, and pick up a big stone and walk it. And they say Arthur Saxon could jump on a bicycle and ride 100 miles without freaking out. Now, I don't know how true that is, but that's what they say. You see what I mean? The breadth of physicality and the emphasis on truly functional, I think, is the things that we've missed in modern society. And then we argue like a bunch of children. My deal is better than your deal, and I CrossFit, but you are a powerlifter, but therefore I'm cooler than you, or that's all crap. We're all a minute minority of the humans on this planet who care about being superior as a physical being, and we really ought to sort of hang out together instead of hating on each other and being stupid about it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's all movement. It's all physical culture. And it sounds like the original CrossFit trying to bring, in a sense, they weren't trying to bring different things together. It split off from that, right? And went into specialized fields. And yeah, that is something that's lost nowadays, where everyone wants the metrics and numbers, so they just highly specialize, and you sacrifice this whole spectrum of strength.
See, now that's why I take a bunch of crap from people, but that's my whole emphasis, is I don't just want to be like, so I got started in powerlifting, and that's what we did. But now old school powerlifting had a lot of roots with bodybuilding, and had a little bit of roots with Olympic lifting. And when you really, so the old school guys weren't as, they still had, issues with each other, but it was more like, everybody was playing in the same sandbox, and once in a while we'll kick a little sand on you, but it wasn't that like, it got really, really ugly for a while. Now it's actually cycled back to we're a little more friendly with each other, but the old school guys were, okay, like a lot of people might not know this, but like the original bodybuilding contest from the 50s and stuff, the stuff that like Steve Reeves and John Grimmick and all those guys were winning, and the old school guys win that. So those guys actually got points for not only posing on stage, but you got points for actually lifting. So they had backstage actual lifts where you had to be able to do stuff and have a wider variety. And there's my thing that I think a lot of big lifters miss, and what you just said. There are thousands of ways to express the human body. Thousands of ways, amazing ways, things we still haven't discovered yet on the combination of how to do it, on what to do. And there's so much to do. And here's the thing. Like for me, I think simplicity of lifting, like, okay, you watch me just do a dumbbell row. That's a stupid, simple exercise. And people are like, oh, you're so heavy, and it's cheating or what. Listen, I don't care. I do 1 or 2 heavy sets of that, and then I go do something crazy. I find something movement-based to do. I tumble or whatever. There's so many cool things to do. I think one of the big things we can do is just find the smart things that build big bases of strength and then branch out into all the other. Dude, there's so much to explore. Like, over the lifetime of a human body, you could do some wild stuff if you really are dedicated to doing it. And the other thing about that is it doesn't take all day every day. Like this, okay, I did this, I timed this just so I could do it live for your, just because I thought it would be fun. But like that was like 6 sets and took like 10 minutes total leading up to what I was doing. That was it. That's my whole workout for rows for the day. Now I'll go do something fun after. I'll throw knives at stuff or whatever else.
Our lights on fire, right?
Yeah, probably something will end up on fire. Probably. I didn't want to say, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I feel like even if you had 10 lifetimes, you couldn't do every skill that's been formed over the years, and so much of it is cultural too. I mean, if we were doing Indian clubs or that type of culture stuff, they developed a whole thing. If we go to South America and they have capoeira, and there's just limitless things that the body could do. And I think it's fun to explore and try different ones and see what's fun, and not get caught up in, this is a competition, this is the way I have to do it because of some arbitrary sport, which is cool. That's a culture in itself, and they did find the efficient way to train, but you don't have to do that. You could dabble in it.
Right. Well, I think one of the best things that happened to me was getting in competition, but actually the strongest I ever got is after I left competition. And here's why, okay? Powerlifters, Olympic lifters, strongmen, if you want to learn how to squat, deadlift, bench press, you want to learn how to clean and jerk snatch, you want to learn how to flip a tire, lift a rock, they know how to do it. So they're technically proficient, which is huge. Same as if you want to learn how to swing Indian clubs and you go to India, or a guy who does, who's well trained in that. You want to learn kettlebells, go to a legit kettlebell instructor. You want to learn gymnastics, you go to a gymnastics instructor, that whole thing, But go to the guy, but then after that, if you're not going to be a true specialist, if you just want to play and have fun, once you've learned how to actually physically most efficiently do a particular set of lifts, then you can go do awesome stuff. And there's the thing I think is cool about that is what you said. Okay, yeah, you couldn't master any of this in 10 lifetimes. However, you can get doggone good at stuff. You can get doggone good at a lot of stuff in this one lifetime very quickly. And I think something that people don't get with that is, I get a lot of stuff from people about your training seems totally random. And what you got to remember is that you're seeing stuff on social media that you're only seeing a snippet. You're not seeing the reality of every day and the whole thing. And what you're not seeing is that I have years and years and years of practicing basic lifts, and I still practice them every few days, that one way or the other. That is the first thing that goes on in a lift before I go to another thing. And I said that to say this. Mastering a skill gives you the skill of mastering skills. So if you take one lift, whatever your pet thing is, and take it as far as you can humanly do it, and do that one thing on a regular enough basis, now that's a big thing of, that's a big issue in training. That's a debate for all kind of, how, do you do it every day? Do you do it every week? Personally, I settle on generally about once a week, once every 10 days kind of a thing. But if you take that one thing and pursue it for years and do it over and over and over and over again until you're really, truly good at it and you truly understand the skill, and you go through the phases like Jeet Kune Do had a thing, or Bruce Lee had a thing about, or I may be misquoting or whatever, but like when you start, a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick. And when you're in the middle, it's so much more than that. And then when you master it, it's back to being a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick again. That's the same way with weightlifting, and I think when you master those things, number one, you've taught the body so well on how to pick up things as it goes, and your body is so used to doing it, you have a huge advantage to mastering stuff later on, and within that, you give yourself the ability to then be good at something else that you very quickly, so much more quickly than you thought you could. I think we're just literally convinced that I have to specialize to do this one thing and blah, blah, blah. I'm doing things today that 20 years ago I didn't think were humanly possible, as well as I didn't think would ever be in the cards for me to personally be able to do. And I always thought I was pretty capable. I always had a mindset of you can do basically whatever you can do. I think mastering a skill gives you the skill of literally learning and building things, and it's beyond physical. It's beyond.
I agree.
Yeah.
I want to unpack that a little bit, but yeah, that sounded almost Eastern philosophical in a sense, where you find the 10,000 things mastering the one thing.
Right.
And, I think it's you build principles, and specifically what we're talking about, you just become strong and you discover leverages and how the body works and things you could apply across the board.
Right.
But coming to that, what I found is, especially strongman training, I think that foundation really carries over to other things, and more complexity, more variability tends to help when you go into more specialized and convenient training. So an example, if you're farm boy strong and can lift a rock, I think you'll be better off deadlifting than the other way around, a specialized deadlifter trying to lift some awkward odd object.
I totally agree. And for me, I rarely do a regular conventional deadlift, and I split time about 50-50 between a barbell and a rock, as far as that's my major pulling movement. In other words, most people would say, stones are stones. No, I consider stones like a part of deadlift and back and and as well as they are whole body. And you could now technically use a stone for squats or presses or whatever else as well. But so I split time 50-50 on that, because I think the stone, I agree, totally agree. The stone carries over more to the barbell than the barbell carries over more to the stone, in my opinion. Again, if you're already a 600 or 700 or 800 pound deadlifter, you're definitely going to have an advantage over the guy coming off the couch. But if you're a guy who's spent enough time to be able to lift a 300-400 pound stone, and you haven't done a lot of barbell deadlifts, but then you decide to actually work on them, you'll pick the skill up so much faster. You'll learn to transfer. You'll learn. Yeah, I agree that with all of that stuff. And the next step is then you'll pick up a complicated skill faster than a gross motor skill. So because you've mastered gross motor skill, so say you started with lifting stones, or you split time 50-50, and you got pretty good at both some kind of a deadlift and some kind of a stone work or whatever, and then you want to learn juggling snatches, some kind of a juggling snatch. You want maybe an Olympic snatch, or maybe like I prefer one-arm snatches, and I prefer to do them with all kind of stuff, just because I want the explosive power of pull. I want the simplest version of the gross motor power there as well, but then I also generally try to add some kind of a ridiculous twist of just doing it standing on a balance beam or whatever. Whatever. You'll pick up those things better because you'll have so much more. You have so much more raw horsepower and more physical unit to work with. So your bones are better, your tendons are better, your ligaments are better, your nerves fire better because they've already gotten used to firing. So now just learning the little bit of complexity on top of that, I agree, I think you're better off to build that huge base. And it doesn't take this massive amount of it. Super top end strength takes years. Period. There's no question. That's a game of years. But basic solid strength, and especially basic solid strength from a gross motor standpoint, doesn't take a bunch of time, a week. It doesn't take it's very efficient comparatively. It's not like it's way more complicated to get a PhD in butterfly catching than it is to learn to lift stones. That's pretty easy. Yeah.
And I feel like that's something with a barbell, it's a little bit more technical.
Absolutely.
But I've rarely seen someone hurt themselves lifting up a stone or rock.
Right. Especially, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, especially a natural stone. I do think, so the Atlas stone, or the truly round cut stone, has a little more of a technical standpoint and has become its own total different thing within the competition realm of strongman training. And I do think you occasionally will see some injuries there, but you will see that because the massive volume of practice going on. Plus, when you add in about the real thing you're about only to see in stone lifting is a bicep problem. And that's with the Atlas stone. And that's because the way it has to be gripped, and it's super bicep intensive. Plus you add in the fact that usually strongman guys are also doing stones and arm over arm pulls and tire flipping and a ton of bicep intensive stuff. And finding the balance of what's enough to keep things strong without going into what's enough to start damaging things to the point where you're likely to injure yourself. That's a big issue in the competition training format. But natural stones, dude, are all, as long as you learn basic body mechanics, pretty simple. And I think from a wide standpoint of humanity, we have sunk into the weakest portion of the that we've ever been on the planet, and we have, like, people are going to say, I get this all the time, oh my God, you lift those stones, you're going to get hurt. No, I don't get hurt because I lift those stones.
Well, let's get into that now. I know a lot of people who aren't in our niche or community will look at what you do, shit on fire, throwing axes, balancing and lifting, and think that you're more prone to danger. But I would argue, you might agree, that you are actually, the world is a safer place for you. Strong people and the structure and integrity you built up make what you're doing safer. And you are pushing it a little bit, but you're allowed to. And, you know, that's how we grow. So what would you say to those people who think what you're doing is a recipe for disaster?
I think you are buying into a bill of goods that is sold to people who are sedentary. We are sold to, that is the first thing you're going to hear, because the people who recommend it from a medical professional standpoint, and because the people who recommend it from normal human standpoint, the first thing they're going to tell you is, oh, stop whatever might be bothering you, not find a way to get stronger so you can accomplish anything. A stronger body is harder to hurt. And what you don't see is you see athletes getting hurt at the top end of what's going on, and then you say, oh, therefore, oh my God, that must be horribly dangerous. No, what you're seeing is the equivalent of somebody who drives a NASCAR, who's the best driver on the planet, who happens to be driving at 200 miles an hour and on the 500th lap has a wreck. Okay, when you push to the absolute breaking point of the human body, be it doing anything, be it mentally, be it running, be it lifting, be it whatever, yeah, you incur a little bit more danger. But until that point, okay, who's more likely to survive? The guy who sits at a desk 40 hours a week, doesn't do much of anything, doesn't carry an essential amount of muscle, and a guy jumps on him and beats him in an alley? Or me? Who's more likely to survive it? A guy who legitimately has spent time building every structure of his body. Okay? My bones, I actually had a doctor do this, and actually a scientist wanted to study my son too on that. I had a doctor told me that you couldn't measure the density in my bones from a bone scan because it would be off their chart. I had a scientist walk up and tell my son, your tendons should not be that big. I would like to literally measure and study them. Okay, I have spent time making my human vehicle into an upgraded version. Therefore, I can do the things that you think are going to hurt normal people. Okay, if a guy had never lifted anything and you forced him at gunpoint to pick up a 250-pound rock, he might hurt himself, but chances are he was halfway hurt to begin with. If you do a smart level of training and you do things specifically to make your bones better, your muscles better, your tendons, your ligaments better, your balance better, you make yourself less susceptible to injury versus more susceptible to injury. They're going on the backyard warrior thing of, oh my God, I worked all week, but then I went outside and I lifted this bag of cement and my back hurt for 6 weeks. Yeah, because your back was screwed before you got there. My back is 10 times stronger than yours. Therefore, I can get away with lifting a cement thing and not be a big deal, or I can lift something that's 5 times heavier than you can lift and walk around with it and not hurt. See, people don't get that. I actually probably experience less pain than the average American.
For sure. For sure.
I think you're dead right. The world is safe, to some extent. Now, lighting stuff on fire is a whole other situation. That's you can only, bulletproof so far. Fire, I haven't quite figured out how to bulletproof against fire yet. I'm working on it. But but you see what I mean? I totally agree, man. The harder you train, the more you're prepared for the rigors of life. And not only
Yeah.
that, the greater vitality. Like, so here's the thing: people talk about, oh my God, that's so much work. You burn up so much energy. I would never have enough energy to do what you're doing. Yeah, you know why you don't have enough energy to do what I do? Because you don't do what I do. I am creating a body that builds its own energy. Therefore, I feel like doing crazy stuff all the time. You know what I'm saying? In other words, they're like, oh my God, you're so crazy. No, I'm running around in a vehicle that's running on high octane because I'm creating a vehicle that creates that kind of energy. Therefore, I feel like doing wild stuff all the time, and my testosterone's constantly kicking. And I'm, you know, you have to create the need for your body to have a thing, and that goes for energy. That goes for curiosity. Even I think that goes for all this stuff. Is the same as, you know, people talk about. You work a muscle, therefore it grows. You created that need for your body to build extra muscle. Well, the same goes for energy. The same goes for building a structure. If I slightly expose my structure to things that stress it, it gets better. It gets stronger. The better my structure is, the less likely I am to get hurt.
Yeah, we adapt. And that's so interesting about your bones and your son's tendons and ligaments. Our cells adapt to force imposed on them. I mean, that's gravity. That's why when you go into space, right
You
away.
detrain because you're, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So literally, you are changing your biology and creating a different, upgraded person, like you said.
Right.
And I'd like to say a little bit about vitality. If I'm not mistaken, you're into Qigong.
Yes, sir.
And energy work. Can you go a little bit into that and how you use that in your practice?
Yeah, I think it's the simple. Now, I have experience with that from martial arts. I have experience with it from just study. My formal schooling actually is massage therapy, which deals a lot with and if you look at massage therapy, you see, you know, there's basic training in massage therapy, and then there's probably 25 different specialties you can go to, and everything from things that believe they're truly science-based to things that are super esoteric-based and everything in between. But I'll tell you where I really started to believe that. I saw some of it from martial arts training, but when I first started working with people in massage therapy, you could just literally, if you spend all day with your hands on somebody, your hands will walk away vibrating purely from the energetics of it. And I started to study, and somebody kind of explained a thing to me that really sort of made it pop in my mind. Actually, it's a quote from Deepak Chopra about metaphysics, and it's about that energy, that what you see as physical reality, as physical matter, is actually energy representing in a specific form, and you're exactly the same thing. So you and I are actually the biggest thing in between us, even in our matter, is the space between the molecules. And the biggest thing is those molecules are actually blips of energy that are arranged in a very specific way to become physical matter. And thoughts run right in that same thing. Thoughts generate those impulses, those electrical impulses, those energetic impulses. And if you can control your energetic matter, which is what you are, by thought, then you can begin to control and do a lot of wild stuff. You really can do that. And I started to do really a very formless practice. And I'll tell you why. I watched probably the guy's best strongman as far as a performing strongman in the world. His name's Dennis Rogers, close friend of mine. Amazing guy. They billed him forever as pound for pound world's strongest man. Guy could do one finger pinky chin ups, one arm, one pinky chin ups at 135 pounds. Could curl his body weight basically at 130, one arm curl it. I mean, he's just insane. He's a couple-time world arm wrestling champion. First time I met the guy, I watched him tear a deck of cards into 8 pieces at like 11:30 at night in a hotel room. It's insane. I watched him take a deck of bicycles now, bad to the bone cards, and 8 pieces. Bang, 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 bang. Dude, that's no joke. But here's what I got from that, and here's where it kind of all melded for me. I grew up in powerlifting. If you watch powerlifters psych up, what powerlifters are doing, most of them are doing a hard style Eastern Qigong. They don't know that they're doing it, but that's what they're doing. They're breathing. They're drawing in energy. They're creating and harnessing emotion, aggression. So Qigong comes from that place, but it also, in real Eastern thought, comes from a very soft, very calm place. And what brought it to me and changed my mind about that is watching Dennis perform. And Dennis got into that from performing because, like I was talking about before, as a performer, I can't spend 5 minutes psyching up and coming off like a raging bull in front of a bunch of preschoolers to lift a big rock or to press somebody overhead or do whatever. I need to be able to walk up, be calm, take one breath, and lift. And I started to work on that, and Peter Ragnar, as a friend of mine, also kind of influenced that for me. And really what I started to do is creating a formless energy that I've worked on for a while. And all I would think about is literally, you ever watch somebody walk into a room and they light the room up, or watch somebody walk into a room and the room gets angry because they're angry? Or you walk by somebody and you can literally, without touching them, but you can literally feel that they're there. That's the energy that circles around you. And to some extent, I believe you can control that. And if you simply breathe, I use the most formless possible, simplest way of doing it all. I use I visualize a giant white bubble around myself and then pull it in, move it, and then what I did for strength is I would visualize that, breathe, be calm, pull that into the center of my body, and then push it directly into whatever I was doing. And I practiced that for a while, and what happened is I got to where I just automatically did it. I didn't have to think it happening, it just happened. It just...
So are you channeling this energy, let's say, into the weight, or are you driving it into the ground with your
depends on what I'm doing. So I spent some time in the original, and now I don't even think. Now I just allow it to happen. Okay, but in the original, when I was learning and thinking about it, I spent time doing it where I would think about getting into the ground, where I would think about pushing it into the weight or pushing it into an object, like for instance if I'm punching something, or I would think about literally putting it into the particular muscle that you're using, which is sort of an iron shirt, kind of different Eastern philosophies think about that way. And now I don't even think. Now I just allow. Now I just feel like that is. What I wanted to do was to create a completely melded practice, so that in the beginning I purposely would, like between sets, that's what I would do. I would do a set, think about that, breathe, meditate, think about that, do the next set. Now I just walk and breathe and don't even think and just allow whatever. So I feel like what I've done is taught my body to direct it wherever it needs to be directed.
So it's unconscious now.
It's unconscious. Yeah. Now it's unconscious.
Awesome.
Now, before it was more conscious, and now it's unconscious. And what I found was, number one, I feel like the Western style psyching is very useful because you begin to learn to control things, but it's also a little dangerous. Number one, because it's a blood pressure raising kind of a thing. Okay. And for strongman feats, that can be good, can be bad, just depends on the intensity and the duration of the feat. But here's where I think that's really, it's awesome because it allows you to learn and do those things. And a lot of young guys really need to do that. They need to focus their aggression. But here's what you're doing. You got to remember this. Every time you practice, both physically and mentally, you're creating a Pavlovian response. You're creating a habit. And if your habit is always that to be strong, you have to be mad,
yeah,
then every time you get strong, you get mad. Versus if your habit is that all I need to do to be at my top end strength is take a breath and go. Or all I need to do to be at my top end strength is take a breath and go, and I'm conditioned myself for doing it a few thousand times to be happy when I'm doing it. To me, that's the greatest top end of the mental training of this whole thing, and that's the most unifying to mind, body, spirit. And I've actually found a weirder thing. I'm stronger when I laugh than I am when I'm mad. Yeah. And so usually if you hear me start laughing and it comes out a little bit maniacal, that's when I really am at the top of my deal. That's when I'm...
Yeah, bud, I think this is something huge that people don't talk about enough.
No.
Now, I was younger. I was one of those people who, before training, I had to take like 3 scoops of pre-workout, put my headphones in, get the right song on. I had to sit there and change it. Everything had to be right. I had to get angry, get mad in order to work out. Now, I've realized that I got dependent on that perfect state.
Yep.
And now I went the opposite way. I don't drink coffee anymore. When I'm not feeling it, almost the environment's crazy, there's people running around, it's crowded. I actually appreciate that now I'm not in the optimal state and I have to get it done anyway and focus.
Right.
And that just means that when you are in the game or things are going well, you're ready for the obstacles and the variables that come your way. So yeah, getting dependent on training, you're not going to have an ammonia cap there every time, right?
Right.
In the real world.
Right. Well, one
So
of the guys I worked out with, and I really could not, I was not ready to understand the wisdom of this. And I got nothing against that. Okay, I got nothing against, I don't. I think today, because of the conditioning I've done, I don't think I could actually squeeze out more by being angry. I don't think that would. I don't actually think that would even work anymore. But when I was young, that's how I did it, and that's how I learned to do it from the competitive lifters that I was doing. And okay, I'll give you an example. You've seen guys slap each other as part of a powerlifting thing, dude. We did that, and first time a guy did that, you want to talk about something that puts you in the moment and wide-eyed and lit up. And I immediately, the set after that, I was supposed to squat 405 I was supposed to try a couple of reps with it, and it was the first time I'd ever tried it. And I was supposed to stop at 5, and I did 6 or 7. And was just, okay, because it was the first massive adrenaline dump and massive focus thing I really, really got. But now I can do that without the negative impact and the negative aspects. And I really started to think about training in that life thing. And what this guy said to me was, that what you guys are doing is cool, but like, I work out and like, okay, if I'm outside and something heavy falls on one of my kids, I don't want to have to run inside and get a belt and knee wraps and ammonia caps and say, all right, hold on, don't die for the next 20 minutes while I get ready to do this. And it doesn't work in sport. It doesn't work in self-defense. It doesn't work in day-to-day life. It doesn't work in emergency training if you can't really just sort of call up at will what you do. And I actually think I purposely have done some things experimentally in training to make things less than optimal. Like and I don't do it all the time, but I do it because sometimes I want to prove to myself that I can do it. I trained after 3-day fast. I trained after not sleeping for 24 to 36 hours. I trained at different times of the day, at inconvenient times, or at inconvenient where it wouldn't have been a physical optimal thing for me to do. You know what I'm saying? Like walk outside and been awake for 5 minutes total and out the door. Did something and you don't have to make it crazy and hard or whatever, but I think in doing that, you knock down barriers. Like I'll tell you something else that guy said to me about that. One of my grandmothers introduced me to a guy who lived next door to her, was like an 80-year-old Marine when I was like 16 or 17. I was playing football, and he mouthed off to me about athletics. We call those guys jock strappers. They didn't ever really, what he was saying was they felt like they had to have the perfect conditions. I had my pregame meal 3 hours ahead of the game. I did this ahead of the game, versus a guy who looks at it from a Marine perspective, a guy who looks at it from a Qigong perspective, a guy who looks at it from a workman perspective of, this is what I do. I don't have to get excited about it. I can fall out at 3 a.m. and do it if I have to. I can I can perform multiple times a day, or I can get up in the middle of the night and be awesome if I need to. Or I think there's so much more to mentally explore with that. And I think because you get into it from this very formal, ritualized way of sport, but then it becomes more of a life pervasive thing. At least it did for me. In that I don't want to be strong in sport. I want to be strong in every moment, everywhere, all the time. Period. No matter what it is. And therefore, my mind allows me to be. It doesn't matter if you wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. If you wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to be happy. But you better be very careful how you do it. But I can still fall out and do something. I don't have to say, all right, hold on, I got to go get my pre-workout. No, I got to give me 30 minutes to get ready and do. You can just do amazing things, and you can be, and I actually think you can be in a very near optimal state even at times when you shouldn't be.
Well, but I think even in terms of competition, it's actually useful to get out of that optimal state. So when you're in your off season and you're not training with the knee wraps and the weightlifting shoes, and you're doing it without the pre-workout and all these things, physical changes are happening, but yeah, like you said, emotional, mental. And I think that's like behind the Bulgarian weightlifting system, where they would just wake them up at the middle of the night and say, do a max, and then do it again and do it again. They're just mentally getting tough,
right?
And their body and mind are adapting together. And then leading up to the competition, you peak, right, and you could do the optimization leading up to the actual competition. But that mental, emotional training is so valuable, and I think that will help anyone, especially a competitive athlete. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
no,
I think what I want to do is I want to be closer to that peak all the time without having to create the emotional response that you would need for a game day response. And I think you can get there with that kind of training. That's where I want to be right there. I was at a seminar with Pavel Tsatsouline one time, and they were talking about okay, go to your max, and it was go to X percentage of your max, and I kind of had a little theoretical discussion with him about, okay, hang on, what does that mean? So they talked about in the Bulgarian system, it's a max for the day. Okay, what they mean is a non-emotionally charged walk up and do a heavy lift, a max for the day, and you might fail with 5 more pounds, you might not, but you don't spend 20 minutes psyching, you just walk in and go to work, kind of a thing. And I think over a period of time, it is exactly what you think. It's toughening, it's creating all your body focused in the right direction without having to create that top-end charge. And I think, therefore, you do get a better percentage out of it. But the one thing I think you get is less. Okay, so a guy who doesn't do this very often but uses a massive, aggressive psyching system might be able to walk in and do 80% of his max with no emotional charge up. And then 100% with a 20 minutes of rage and whatever in the headphones and blah, 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 or whatever. Whereas a guy who does this all the time can do 90% 5 minutes before breakfast, 5 minutes after breakfast, 5 minutes after midnight. Now, their top end, and probably his top end max would be better because, like, okay, Slim Farman, the old-time strongman, used to talk about that, about taking the governor off, about we have built-in safety mechanisms that really stop us from doing what we truly are, the top end. And a lot of the training that I do is actually based on knocking a lot of that down. It's making your body feel like it truly can present the effort. It's getting more out of a muscle than you think it ought to be able to get out of itself. I think that's a big deal. In doing that kind of training, you're getting closer and closer to limitless mindset without having to create you don't have to Hulk out. You just are the Hulk. You just
yeah.
yeah.
I experimented, but with squatting every day to a max that wasn't grinding or wasn't in the 95 or 90 above that. And yeah, I want to say 2 months into it, I would just go up to the bar and I would be right up there with the max without even thinking. It's just the feeling of it doesn't create anxiety. It's just another day. You're tempering the mind and the body. But I wanted to ask you, as far as training for longevity, training for the future, for health.
Okay.
What do you think people could do, some basic things that would change their mindset as far as training for the long run and having that vitality?
I think one of the first things is you got to make this an absolute habit. Okay, like it isn't a thought of whether I'm going to train. It's just when am I going to do it today? It's not if I'm going to do it. It's just, okay, I have to do this, and this. I'm going to train at this moment. I think it has to be that kind of a habit, and it needs to be the idea of a lifetime habit. In other words, I intend to be doing exactly what I'm doing today at whatever level is possible till the day I leave this planet. I have no thought, because I believe that this is maintenance and repair. Just like when you eat, it provides energy to get through the next 24 hours or the next whatever. This is the energy to get through the next whatever, that whole thing. I think you are so much better from an age standpoint to be stronger. People say that to me all the time. You lift so heavy, you're going to be crippled, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let me tell you what I've observed. I've observed 80-year-old guys who did absolutely nothing physical in their life. And if you follow the mindset of be careful, don't hurt anything, don't do it, guess what? At 80, they ended up with arthritis and problems and pain, and they couldn't get up. And I know 80-year-olds who were like Evil freaking Knievel met, Tarzan, and they lifted crazy things, and they did lift crazy things, but their bodies were very strong. And when they got to the end of whatever age that was, say the same age, if they for some reason had been injured to the point that they had to stop training, they ended up at the same place. So I would rather live as hard, as long as possible till I got there. But I actually think you're better off, and this is proven in non-regular training people, in that the body can still get stronger. The stronger you are, the less susceptible you are to deterioration-based diseases. Okay?
Hmm.
And guess what happens with people with arthritis in their old age? When you stop moving, you hurt, and you lose the ability to move. Or if you get arthritis and keep moving, you hurt a little less than the average guy who does stop moving, and you still keep the ability to do stuff. So, listen, at some point, something bad will happen to everybody. It just does. That's how nobody gets out of this alive. But you want to be the best you can possibly be, you better train as hard as possible up until that point. With the exception of maybe not going to the NASCAR example before of if you drive 200 miles an hour for 500 laps, you're going to get a ding on the fender. Okay? Now, that being said, personally, I lean toward a couple of things. Okay? I lean toward some type of a heavy lift every day, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same one. I feel like you need to concentrate on a heavy lift. Something for your legs, something for your back, something for your pushing muscles. Doesn't necessarily matter what it was. You need to pick the one that's good for you. So if I tell you to squat like an Olympic lifter, but that particular style of squat leaves you barely able to walk, versus maybe you squat like a power lifter and you're fine, then you need to squat like a power lifter and not worry about whether somebody else's thing is, or maybe you squat like I do. I do almost all my stuff from the bottom. It fits me. It helps me with the other stuff I want to do. I don't walk away from it hurting. Does it matter if you and I, and if we pick 6 guys and we all squat with 6 different styles and you test our legs, and you're really going to be able to tell? No. But if I force myself to fit somebody else's mold and that mold isn't biomechanically correct for me and it grinds my joints and knees and issues, that's a problem later on. Find your own way, do something heavy, but do it with a recovery in mind. And here's what I mean with a recovery. I don't mean necessarily day-to-day recovery, but I do mean that. But what I mean is inflammation-based recovery. Okay? So I think there's recovery as in, so say I squat every Monday. Am I ready to go again every Monday and then lift heavier? So I did 700 this week, and I do 705 next week. I'm recovered. But if I'm not recovered to the point that I could still go up in weight, but I hurt more, or I'm creating a stack of damage, of inflammation that keeps going higher and higher and higher, then something about what I'm doing is wrong. Something about the volume, something about the intensity, something. So you have to, I think, in a longevity base, you have to consider not just regular recovery. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? But are you recovering from an inflammation standpoint? Now that may be some other things as far as like possibly massage, or definitely maybe cold, heat, or whatever, or maybe it's nutrition. Maybe you're not recovering from that particular standpoint. I do think, however, it's the exercise. A lot of it has to do with is what you're doing in your life adding inflammation to your body in some way or another, and are you recovering in some way so that inflammatory level of pain or whatever is staying down or keeping down. Okay, so when you peak for me, a lot of times you're going up in strength. You're also going up in inflammation, which is why you can hit that peak and then you can't deal with it anymore. On a lifetime longevity basis, I don't want to do that. I want to go recover and be strong and stay strong and be strong forever, but I also want that inflammation to be at a manageable or lower level. For me, that goes with lifting heavy but not super death, max all the time. Okay, but I generally go every heavy, whatever I'm doing heavy, I cycle on a 7 to 10 day basis. So if I squat, maybe I'll squat again in 10 days. Deadlift maybe 10 days later. It just depends or whatever. But some type of heavy lift most days of the week, and some type of an endurance thing. And I do think from a longevity, you need health and longevity, a couple of things there. You need cardiovascular power. Can't get around that. Has to be there. Most of your big lifters, that's why I dropped so much body weight after I got to my top end of absolute max strength and was nearly 400 pounds, and then I lost 100 pounds. And I did that because you can only maintain that weight for so long without the health problems. And you just get, it doesn't matter whether you're healthy when you do it, doesn't matter how strong you are when you do it, your system has a tipping point above which this is bigger than we can possibly support from a heart, lung, kidney, liver, pancreas situation. You got to maintain whatever is the healthiest for you. For me, there are 3 types of cardio that you need to do, and you need to do them regularly. You need to be real intense short cardio, real intense long cardio, and then just basic walking level, long, slow type cardio. I personally believe in rotating them and not over-hammering any one, but I do the short, intense one much more often. But I do it in a way that, like, it's more of an energy building thing. I usually don't take it to the absolute, let's die from this today. to let's be up and ready to go, and I can do this, and now I want to go conquer the world versus now I want to go in and sleep.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. And I think you need to go to the edge, but you don't need to do it very often. And I think by not doing it very often, you keep your hormones and your hormones up and your inflammation down.
I love that. Bud, I love what you said about comparing movement to your diet.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think there's a parallel there, because as far as longevity is concerned, you need your meat and potatoes, which is strength, muscle mass. You need the vitamins and the minerals, which is maybe mobility and these restorative recovery type movements as well. Yeah, all those together lead to health and longevity. And I feel better when I do some sort of strength, heavy lift. I think just your nervous system and your hormonally, you do feel better.
Absolutely.
That frequent input. So I love that. That's great advice.
I do think you did mention one thing I think that most people skip that we talk about now more than ever. And we talk about it because, again, maybe with the emphasis of CrossFit, and that has a tendency to take people to the intensity level where they hurt, and then they need to do mobility, and they need to do flexibility and stuff, where we've always known we need to do that, but we don't do it. I think that's another thing. And I think you're putting the same emphasis on how heavy you lift as well as how well you move, how flexible you are, how good your joints function, how pain-free you are. All of those things need to be that same emphasis, not just, short term you might emphasize one thing because you got a particular goal or whatever, but long term you need to play with how often you do things, how hard you do things, what movements of anything you do, what stimulates your nervous system versus what annihilates it, and what helps you move better versus what makes you move bad. All those things are little variables to play with, and you can keep on the top end of those things all at the same time. And I really do think that's another important thing, mobility. Like, if you ever watched, most people, again, they say if you watch my training on Instagram or Facebook, because you're only seeing the feat of strength I particularly did that day, you're probably going to see it totally random. What you're not going to see is, but if you look at it on a longer stretch, you're going to see a squat, you're going to see a press, you're going to see a pull, you're going to see a balance movement, you're going to see a coordination movement, you're going to see multiple endurance movements, you're going to see a strongman movement, you're going to see grip movements, you're going to see mobility, you're going to see flexibility, and you're going to see it all cycled on a regular basis. Everything gets an emphasis, no left out part. I think that's one of the big keys to the top end of everything. And the top end of everything all at the same time for the longest time possible, with the greatest possible benefits of health and not living in pain and doing the best you can possibly do.
And I think a lot of people nowadays who are in the functional world are getting away from strength. It's not as cool to do anymore. They want the mobility and the pretty movement. And like you said, we have to think of strength as longevity, as health. It's not just a ego thing, a masculine thing. It is what we need to thrive.
Right.
And yeah, people have kind of seem to be getting away from that.
I agree. I agree. That's a whole, and I think it's a mistake. But I think it's also a mistake in this way. You can keep and have strength with such a small amount of training. Why not do it? Why not be okay? So say you want to be able to do a quadruple tornado, kick, and then one finger swing off a ring into some kind of a back whatever gymnastic thing that looks amazingly artistic. But would you be better off to be able to deadlift double or triple body weight and do that at the same time?
The time's going to stop right now.
Okay.
So man, Bud Jeffries was dropping knowledge bombs, guys. Killing it. I'm back on here. Yeah, sorry about that, but it gives us like an hour and 20 time limit.
Okay.
So do you want to continue? I think we were talking about the move away from strength that we see.
Yeah. I mean, now, you kind of have to quantify strength in different types of strength. For instance, gym, that's always been a big thing, and that was the kind of the movement in gymnastics. Gymnasts are super strong on a body weight basis,
Relative, yeah.
and super, but I think you can have. We were talking about, people moving to that like super artistic, flowy movement. And if you ever watch the stuff that I do whatever level of that I can do on a fairly regular basis. I think you can have both, and I think you need to have both, and I think you're a better human if you can flowingly, artistically move in a coordinated way and squat or deadlift double or triple your body weight. And I think you can have both without the problem. I think that what we're conditioned to see, and this is something I've talked about so my original work, a lot of it was in combining multiple types of training, combining heavy lifting, barbells with strongman and high rep body weight stuff, which I was really into fighting at that time, and that was my whole original emphasis in the first book that I wrote. That was it. That was why. But what people didn't get, and I've talked to people about this all the time, is what people try to do, and the mistake they try to make is they want to train like an elite gymnast and an elite powerlifter at the same time with no conjoining of the system, but this is my system and this is my system, and I'm just going to keep them both together, which is 27 hours a week of training. And dude, first of all, who has time for that? And second, there's a reason those guys are super specialists in their particular deal, and that's all you can possibly recover from. The reason Lance Armstrong rode a bike 100 miles a week or 100 miles a day for 18 times a week is because that's the most he could possibly get and humanly recover from. And the reason Ronnie Coleman trained 2 hours a day, 6 days a week to that way is because that's the most he could possibly recover from with that one emphasis. But you can get 80 to 90, sometimes even 100% of the capability of each of the specialists of those systems with a very small amount. Mm-hmm. With a very, very small amount. Something I've talked about is this, okay? You see, all right, when you equalize everything for drugs and equipment and all that stuff, especially if you look at the old-time Olympic lifters, especially if you equalize for the percentage for drugs, if you look at the guys from the 50s, they were training 3-4 times a week. They were doing clean and jerk twice a week, snatch twice a week, squat twice a week, some kind of other pulls and other stuff. And then you got the Bulgarians, okay, who trained 4 times a day and 7 days a week and the whole thing or whatever. They didn't really get that much stronger. The smaller amount of training really paid just about the same amount of dividends. I would rather train a little less, smarter, be able to do it my whole life without having to take an anabolic. Now, I don't have a problem with people do it. I don't believe personally. I'm not going to do it. And I don't think you should need to do it to maintain your life. I believe the same. Like, that's actually kind of the reason I eat the way I eat and think the way I think about things. Is I don't want to have to. If I have to really put it all in a powder and I have to go to GNC to live, I don't like that idea. I want to be able to get the best food, the best training, the best whatever I can without it being something I have to necessarily be contrived in a factory that can only be concentrated and supplemented a certain way, and I can't possibly recover any other way. If you can't live in a relatively natural way, I think you've made a kind of a mistake in the way you set things up. But like in that whole artistic movement thing, I think your artistic movement is made better when you're stronger. And your strength is made better when your artistic movement is better. And you can have, what I was setting up to say with that is you can have that strength, dude, with very little training. I squatted 1,000 pounds. Leading up to that, I squatted 900 pounds by training 5 single repetition sets once every 10 days.
Wow.
That was it. Now, I moved from 900 to 1,000 pounds. I was actually training every day, but I was only training about 10 minutes of squats a day. And again, it was only about 1 or 2 warm-up sets and about 4 single repetition sets. That's it. You don't need a massive volume to get superhumanly strong. And in fact, by using a relatively small volume, you don't add a lot of inflammation. You don't beat anything up. You stay relatively fresh all the time. And if I can do that, and okay, maybe it takes me a few months longer than a guy who's training 18 times a week. But if I do that and I'm not hurt and I can maintain it for a long period of time and basically be fresh all the time, I think I'm winning. And I think you can do that with, okay, my idea is this. So you want to be Mr. Artistic Movement, you want to be Mr. Mobility. Okay, go do 5 singles and a deadlift 1 day a week. Not going to hurt your mobility, not going to hurt any of that or whatever. Probably going to protect you and help you move better and help you be stronger and help you do. I trained a kid one time who was not super fast, but he beat a guy who ran a 4.5 40 for pure speed in lateral shuffle drills in the lateral test, a sprint one way, turn direction, sprint back or whatever. He could beat this guy in the change-ups and the turnaround because he didn't have the pure physical wiring for the straightforward speed, but he had so much strength he could manipulate his body to change direction so much better. He got better. You can build your body's ability to use its nerves to the absolute max by having the greatest strength.
Yeah. And even mobility, when you're strong in those ranges you have, that's a lot better than just being able to show off where you can go, flexibility passively, like yoga. Like I've seen you in some yoga-like poses, but you have a bunch of weight in your hands or your back. And that's just safer being in those ranges where you are kind of liable to getting hurt. And I also love what you said about getting in that 10% strength level of these elite people, because I always tell people we seem to look at the top athletes in our society as who to mimic, who to train. And I want to do this elite powerlifters training program. But that 80% skill, anything past that, people don't seem to realize is a whole nother level. Getting to that 80%, 60% competency is fairly easy to do with investment. But that top 10% that separates the, college level from the pro level or to Olympic level is a lifetime dedication.
Right.
I mean, you're in there every day. So why not just get fairly competent at as much as you can instead of investing all that time, unless you're competing or you want to go.
Right. Well, and like from my mind, though, to me, I think you can also, I totally agree with that with one caveat. Don't mentally limit yourself. Because, like Einstein had a quote about if you test everybody's intelligence the same way, but if you test a monkey the same way you test a fish, it'll always think it's stupid. That whole, I think that's one of the reasons that competition is wonderful, but competition is limiting, and everybody has some physical gift that they could probably be amazing at if they were willing to simply work hard enough. I think that's a big issue with that. I think you could, you know what I'm saying? In other words, I think if you look at powerlifters as an example, guys with long arms are generally great deadlifters. Guys with short arms are generally much better bench pressers, and guys with middle leverages generally tend to be better squatters, but they're not really quite as same as it. You see what I mean? It's sort of, now powerlifting is fair because it balances. So if you're a great deadlifter but a lousy bench presser, but you compete against a guy who's a great bench presser and a lousy deadlifter, you see what I mean? It's fair. But what I'm saying with that is you have inside you probably the ability to be physically incredibly stronger than you think at something without a massive amount of training. Now, that last few percent like you're talking about, that last few percent that's the all-time world record holders is guys who are willing to die for that particular thing. Guys who, like I know dudes who have given up, and I think this is dumb. I think this actually holds you back because they've so dedicated to training that they lose their wife, they lose their kids, they lose everything else that doesn't, I know guys who've thrown their whole life away on that, and I've been at that place for moments in my life. I've been at that place where I was willing to die to do what I'm doing. But you can get right in that range without going to that level, especially that level of sacrifice, without it being that kind of a thing. And you really don't. I'll give you an example of somebody I wanted to mention before. This guy was a powerlifter. His name was Mark Chalet. Okay, Mark Chalet squatted 1,000 pounds in competition on a similar training to what I did, on just single rep sets once a week. Everybody could do that if they just spent enough time and years and figured out the best form for themselves and the best. That's a totally doable type of training that you might be able to go so far into further than you think. I think the only thing I disagree with what you're saying, and again, totally agree, competency at everything. But it depends on what you want. Now, I have a very strength bias, so like, there's some gymnastic stuff that's really probably would take me that kind of I'm going to die to do this dedication to get there that I don't care about doing back in. So pick the things you care about. Huh?
I saw you doing handstands. I think you could do it.
Maybe it's possible. There's what I mean, though. Because I learned it from lifting, I think there's just about anything. I can do just about anything. And I don't mean that as a self-aggrandizing way to saying that. I'm saying that you are capable if you problem solve well enough to figure out what it takes to get there. You just are. You're capable of doing that. Your physical body is capable of doing things that most people are. It's out. The only thing stopping them is whether they believe they can do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think with enough training and maybe that means from a couple of years standpoint, but not a lot of volume, just the right mindset and intensity, you could take almost any human on the planet without having been born with a structure that's totally incapable, and push them to a double body weight squat or double body weight deadlift it totally achievable, given them believing it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean? Like, I think, and you could also push that to, okay, I'm 300 pounds and I do one-arm handstands on a fairly regular basis. Most people say that's totally impossible. You're just a freak. No, I just believe I can do it. I just believe I can do it, and I problem solved well enough, and I prepped enough to be able to handle it.
So I want to lead into that. We're talking about belief. I feel like belief really matters when there's conviction and when it leads to action. That's when beliefs really become an important part of your life. And I know that you're a minister also. So I want to talk about your faith and how that affects the physical part of your life and these things we're talking about as far as goals. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, and sure. Dude, ask me anything you want. I'm okay. I'm actually an ordained Baptist minister, but I'm pretty well in the hooligan camp, pretty much, as far as I'm kind of a savage for Baptists, so it's not really that kind of a thing. I truly, totally believe in God, but I'm a non-denominational person. I don't believe in any of that. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe God loves us enough to spend special energy to build you special and specific to you. And I believe if God did that to gift you, then God gave you the ability to do some amazing things. And I think we're responsible to use everything that we have to be able to go as far as possible. Now, the Bible talks about a parable of the talents where people were given a certain amount of money to invest and they didn't do, and somebody hid it and just said, well, I don't really want to try. And somebody went out and invested and did everything and multiplied their abilities. I think every one of us has that. I think we're societally conditioned to hide from things that God intends for us to do. And I believe in believing that if God loves me and God cares about me, why can't I do what I want to do? Why can't I believe in those things? Why can't I believe? If God believes in me that much, why don't I believe in myself? In fact, maybe it's wrong for me not to believe in myself to the point that I take myself as far as humanly possible and above and beyond that. And I believe that God does help you in some of those things, in some of those moments and situations, and I believe that God created all of us with a purpose and with specific talents. I happen to have come to strength relatively easy, but some of the other things, I think God gives you talents and weaknesses because He wants you to take those talents as far as possible, but He also wants you to take those weaknesses and make them as strong as possible. And I think that we're responsible to do that. I think that God cares about us to the point to make those things available to happen. And I think most of us are just living in a prison of not believing we're able to do that, or a prison of not believing that God wants us to do that, or whatever societal rules we're afraid to break because we're afraid somebody might laugh at us or afraid somebody might think we're, dude, half the people in the world who know me think I'm totally insane. I'm fine with that. I don't care. That's a total, they're like, why in the world would you do that? Listen, I believe I've been given a vehicle to live this life through, and I'm going to take that vehicle and do as crazy things as I can possibly do. And the same with your mind and the same thing with your spirit. I believe you're going to have a long life. You're going to have a peaceful life. And that's a big thing I think that faith really gives you is like, I mentioned this earlier. I know particular lifters who sold his soul basically to become a world champion. And in doing that, went through a couple of marriages and divorces and kids and stuff happens. I'm not judging that in any way. He specifically said, I screwed that up because I was so dedicated to this, whereas maybe if I'd have had a little bit better thought process in how I dealt with people, how I loved people, what I committed to that, I actually believe that the peacefulness in his life would have created a better athletic ability. Because if you're saying, I'm going to train no matter what, and I don't care what kind of chaos it creates, well, you got to deal with the aftermath of the chaos. Versus if you love people and help them, the peacefulness it creates gives you, then there's no barrier to it. Why do I don't have to deal with the other fires I've lit in my life. I can go light something on fire and throw an axe at it at home, and nobody's going to have to give me a problem with it. Because does that make sense? Is that?
Man, that makes total sense. I'm just thinking as far as we're talking about recovery and stress and emotions, and getting your house in order, your life, and having this practice. It's the body and the mind are connected, and the spirit. It's all one. So to think that you could sacrifice the rest to devote to one, it's gonna come back and bite you in the ass. I think
That's going to have consequences. It's going to have huge consequences, and I think it holds you back. I think if you haven't set your life up to make things as the best you can possibly make them, and I mean that in a top-end perspective of how. Like, dude, I love my wife more than anything on the planet, and she's been married to the craziest man walking for 22 freaking years. But I love her. She knows that, period. I'll do anything in the world for her. I don't create problems for her, or I try not to, other than occasionally having to bandage something or, whatever. Or that kind of, you see, she's sitting across from me, so I'm trying to make her laugh. But what I mean by that is, dude, you can have every bit of this. We're conditioned to believe that almost all the success stories we see is, I sacrificed, I threw my family away so I could run a Fortune 500 company. Dude, you don't have to do that. You just have to have better control and better thought process of how you're going to handle the day-to-day things. And you have to be truly committed to helping and loving the people in your life. Like, that's a big thing. If your idea of waking up every morning is stress and like yelling at each other, you got to fix that, dude. You got to have a better situation. That ain't going to work. That's going to be problems.
Bud, I want to say thank you again for the talk. Thank you for taking time.
Yes, sir.
One thing I want to recommend to you and people listening, you got a lot of good shit on your website. You got a lot of products, a lot of information. People might not know that. Do you want to name your website where they could find it?
Well, we have two websites now that we're really dealing with. The first is anunconventionallife.com with one L, so not an unconventional L and then L life, one L, unconventionallife.com. That's my personal website, and then I don't know if you know about what's going on in our life in the last year, but our son was killed in a motorcycle accident, and we have a website that is dedicated specifically to him, which is noahsarmyfoundation.com and .org. I'm sorry, .org. I always forget the org part. And what we did is created a charitable foundation at which we are paying for scholarships for first responders. We're paying for scholarships for other people. We're paying for a musical program for children in hospitals, and we're going to do everything we can possibly do to achieve the goals from our son's life.
I'm sorry to hear.
Thank you. But those are the two websites. If you want to find my books and videos and the things that we've done as far as strength, I think I have 7 books and like 80 videos on anything ridiculous you could possibly do strength-wise, from normal stuff all the way down to the wild stuff. And then I don't know if you can see me. I know my phone's dying. If you want to find the other stuff or donate to our charity, it's noahsarmyfoundation.org.
Awesome. And I want to say, the way I found you originally was your isometrics product. And
cool.
I love isometrics. I was always been big into it. I use it for like mobility and strength and everything. And it was great. You have a lot of good content out there. You need to be posting that stuff a lot more on your Instagram, man.
I'll definitely start putting more of it on there. I'll definitely start throwing more of that on there. It's I'm constant experimental mode on those things, and so whatever I happen to be thinking about at that moment is what you're going to see on my Instagram. But we'll definitely put some more of that on there and put it up more.
Yes, go check that out. And I'm always looking forward to what you put out from you. And I hope to chat with you again sometime, man. It's been great.
Absolutely, man. That would be wonderful. I really enjoyed it, and it's been a very good talk. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate it.
All right, bud. Have a good night, man.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.